Read the question properly and try to understand what it needs and how you will approach it. Pause the video to think for a minute and come up with your own answer. Then I will explain you the solutions. Let's start with the Python code first. This Python function first sorts the list A in ascending order so that we can prioritize reading shorter books. It then initializes two variables, count, to track how
Now
many
we will
books
look at
Alex
the
can
Java
read,
code.
and total time to accumulate the time spent reading. The for loop goes through each book's reading time, and if the current total time plus the new book's time is less than or equal to the limit n, Alex reads that book. Finally, the function returns the number of books Alex can finish. Now we will look at the Java code. First, the array A is sorted using arrays.sortA, which ensures that Alex can start by reading the books that take the least time. Next, we initialize two variables, count, which keeps track of how many books Alex can finish, and total time, which sums up the reading time as Alex goes through the books. The for loop iterates over the sorted array of book times. For each book, if adding its time to total time doesn't exceed the time limit n, Alex reads that book and we increase the count. Finally, the program returns the count, which is the number of books Alex can finish within the given time. Read the question properly and try to understand what it needs and how you will approach it. Pause the video to think for a minute and come up with your own answer. Then I will explain you the solutions. Let's start with the Python code first. We start by initializing a count to keep track of the number of houses visited, and I is set to 1, representing the first house. The while loop continues until the current house index, I, exceeds the total number of houses. Inside the loop, we increment the count for each visited house. Then, we update I to jump to the next house based on the value at the current house. Finally, the function returns the total number of reachable houses. Now we will look at the Java code. We start by initializing count to track how many houses have been visited, and set I to 1, which represents the first house. The while loop runs as long as I is within the bounds of the array. For each house visited, we increment the count, and then we update I by adding the value at the current house. This simulates hopping from one house to the next. Once we're out of bounds of the array, the loop stops, and the total number of reachable houses is returned. Read the question properly and try to understand what it needs and how you will approach it. Pause the video to think for a minute and come up with your own answer. Then I will explain you the solutions. Let's start with the Python code first. The function library nka works as follows. N is the number of shelves in the library. K is the maximum number of books that can be collected from each shelf. A is a list where each element represents the number of books on a shelf. For each shelf, if its index plus 1 is a prime number, the function will collect books from that shelf. But it will only take the minimum between k, the limit, and the number of books available on that shelf. To check if a shelf's index is prime, the helper function is prime n is used. It determines whether a number n is prime by checking if it's divisible by any numbers up to its square root. We take the minimum so that we can collect k books if there are more than k books in the shelf, else collect all the books available. We add up books taken from each prime labeled shelf and return it as the result. Now we will look at the Java code. The key method here is the library method, with parameters n, k, and a. N is the number of shelves in the library. K is the maximum number of books that can be collected from each shelf. A is an array where each element represents the number of books on each shelf. We also have the isPrime, on, and n method, which checks whether a number en is prime. If a shelf's index is prime, the program will collect books from that shelf. The number of books collected will be the smaller value between the maximum allowed k and the number of books on the shelf. The for loop runs through each shelf checking if the shelf number starting from 1 is prime. If it is, we collect books from that shelf.